We've decided to revise the structure of the risk management department, Jillian said, not looking at me, but at a point near my shoulders. It's just a change. Of course it is. It's been the third Friday in a row that the meeting has started with, "It's not personal." And then they fire one particular person with a name, surname, and 30 years of history with the company. I listened in silence. My head was quiet, not because it didn't hurt, but because I already knew how it would end. I had heard the words optimization, reform, and fresh approach enough times to learn how to translate them into reality. And in reality, it means that you've been pushed out, and they won't even thank you. My name is Cora Breyer. I'm 58, and I just found out that I no longer work for the company I helped save from lawsuits, scandals, and financial pits for 26 years. My official title is Senior Risk Analyst at NorthStem Logistics in Boise, Idaho. It's not loud, not glamorous, but I knew how to read contracts, stop managers' tantrums, and predict a drop 6 months before the first crack. And that seems to have been the problem. "You're being very picky, Cora," Troy told me a few weeks ago, the new COO who everyone admired for wearing hoodies over his shirts and talking about innovative agility, without your reservations. At the time, I just sighed and closed the folder. And today, I am being let go, gently, politely, with promises of decent compensation and gratitude for years of service. But when I asked about my recommendations on the risk of the MDM 207 project, the same $12 million project that I blocked just yesterday because of inconsistent certifications, I was answered with a phrase that will stay with me for a long time. "We don't need your expertise anymore," Jillian said in a flat voice, as if I were offering her cooking tips rather than warning her about a potential disruption of a federal supply. I took the box. I put in the mug with the words, "Keep calm and read the clause," that I had given myself for my 50th birthday. I added a notebook with a red highlighter, the one I used to use to draw diagrams of lawsuits on paper, and she pulled out a single sheet from the drawer, a copy. The last contract review I kept for myself, not out of spite, but out of anticipation. When the door closed behind me, I didn't feel angry. There was something else. The silence that lay around me like a scarf after a long day, not comfortable, but familiar. I knew I had done the right thing, but I also knew that there would be no more silence. There would be noise. It's funny, but the very document that made them decide to remove me was not read at all, at least not where it mattered. Let me explain. The MDM 207 project was a large-scale undertaking. It was a $12 million contract to supply medical equipment to several clinics in Texas. On paper, everything looked smooth. Deadlines, logistics, payment, and a bonus for speeding up the execution. But when I was handed the specification, I had the same feeling I always had before chain accidents. Nothing has happened yet, but you can already see that there will be an impact. I spent 3 evenings checking everything. The certificates were not in order. The documents from the supplier were signed with a date that did not match the state register. The declaration of conformity was copied from another manufacturer. I even found a PDF with a latent layer, hidden text in the metadata. In modern transactions, this is essentially a microbomb. When I brought the analysis to internal review, Troy didn't even wait for me to finish. "Cora, we have a launch deadline in 5 days," he said. "If we don't sign, competitors will break into the niche. We can't afford your paranoia." I didn't answer right away. I just put the report on the table and said quietly, "This is not paranoia. These are the very points for which we can be revoked from certification and lose the right to distribute in 2 states. If they turn up, we don't just get a fine. We're out of business." He smiled. "We've already passed the due diligence. Our lawyers said it was operationally acceptable." Operationally acceptable. This is the new religion. If something is not burning right now, it means that you can set it on fire. Interestingly, a few years ago, we had almost the same case. Back then, I stopped the deal on the last day when I discovered that one of the carriers was dealing with fake warehouses. We saved the company from a 6-figure fine. I was even nominated for an Internal Impact Award at the time, although I refused to speak on stage. And now? Now it's the other way around. I'm an outdated brake that checks the wrong things. We used to have a principle: if in doubt, suspend. Now, if there is no proof of damage, we launch it. Someone once said, "This is not corporate suicide, this is aggressive scaling." Troy relied on speed. He joined the company 6 months ago and immediately began to revise approaches. The first to go were 2 managers from the operations department, both of whom had been working since the 2000s. Then he started layoffs in the legal department, 2 slow checks. And now it's me. Because I had the nerve to demand confirmation of certification instead of trusting internal sources. I've seen this before, not with this management, but in other companies. When the logic changes, the rules also change, but only for those who still remember them. And there are fewer and fewer of them. I returned home that evening with a box in my hands and a report in my bag. And you know what? It didn't feel like an end. It felt like a pause. Like the beginning of a chess game where I don't know who I'm playing against yet, but I know that the first move was not made by me. But the second move will be mine. I've already seen how it works. And you know, it's always the same scheme, only with different logos on the entrance badges. The first time was back in the 90s, at Corvin Systems. I was just starting out, a junior analyst, a kind of shadow in the corner with a business suit from a sale. There was a contract with a pharmaceutical company, a small local deal involving the transportation of reagents that were to be classified as hazardous under the new laws. No one asked me, but I found the formula and saw that something was wrong. I warned the manager. He said, "It's not our responsibility if the supplier signed the declaration." 2 months later, there was a leak in the warehouse. 1 employee received a chemical burn. The company paid a fine and lost a partner. I didn't say I warned you at the time. I just made a copy of the report and left quietly. The second case was in 2008. It was already at Northstem Logistics, where I worked for another half of my life. It was a large agricultural supply project. The idea was to bring our cargo to new climatic zones. In the documents, I found unaccounted for storage coefficients that could lead to damage to the goods. I reported it. I was listened to, but with a comment. Let the farmers figure out where and how to store. I got an additional page in the contract. I literally begged for the right to change the terms in case of unfavorable conditions. And 6 months later, we did have to change the route. The client was satisfied. But you know what? The press release only mentioned the flexibility of the logistics model, not about me. And the third time, here it is. And it is perhaps the most cynical. Because this time, I am not a young newcomer or an anonymous performer. I am the one who has been addressed for years with the phrase, "Cora, can you check again, just in case?" I am the one who approved the delivery structures for the FDA, who was signed off on during insurance inspections. And now, I'm the one who's preventing us from moving forward. Ironically, I didn't even argue with Troy. I just said, "If the contract goes through without the accompanying appendix, I won't sign it. If you go ahead without me, that's your right, but my name will not be on it." He nodded. "I see." And he raised his eyebrows, as he always does when he makes a decision that he considers a strong step. The next day, HR called me in to talk about the department structure. I remember sitting in the kitchen in the evening with no overhead light, just a lamp by the stove, and a folded sheet of paper with my notes to the contract on the table. I unfolded it a second time, and a third time, even though I already knew every word. There were 4 pages, each with an underline, a note, a risk. "What do you want to do with this?" My eldest daughter, who had just arrived for the weekend, asked me. She always speaks bluntly, like her father. "Nothing for now," I answered. "But if something goes wrong, I will at least not let them pretend that no one knew." "Are you sure you shouldn't have just kept quiet?" "If I had kept quiet, I wouldn't have been able to wash my hands afterwards," I said. "It's not pathos, it's a habit. My hands were always clean, not because I was sinless, but because I knew all the risks. And when they came, at least I could say, I did everything I could. That's why when people ask me why I kept a copy of the report, I don't answer. It was not a backup plan. It was a document for memory, for my conscience. Because, as my experience has shown, everything repeats itself. The only question is whether you are ready to face it with open eyes. And with clean hands. Monday, 8:55 a.m., officially my last day. It was almost theatrically polite. HR invited me to an exit meeting. In the room were Jillian from HR and the same junior lawyer who still hadn't learned to pronounce my name correctly. They read out the standard formula. Due to reorganization, the functions of the position will be distributed among other departments. I nodded silently, signed the papers, even smiled. Jillian said, "We are grateful for your contribution, Cora. Your years of service are an example to many." I looked at her and thought, how many of those who are grateful here even know what I have been doing all these years? How do you explain to a person who has never had a night of neon stress from a lack of certificates that sometimes your job is simply to stop a disaster before it becomes a fact? I stood up and thanked him, quietly. No offense intended. My desk, the same one I'd occupied for the last 10 years, by the window overlooking the back parking lot, looked awkwardly empty. In the drawer was an old flash drive, a bunch of keys, and a tiny note from a colleague from the last decade. "You've always been my airbag." I carefully put everything in a box. "This isn't fair," I heard a voice to my left. I turned around. There stood Allison, an analyst in the contract department. Young, bright, and always with a flawless bottom line for any contract. She was one of the few people who asked me for advice without hesitation. "This decision," she trailed off, "it's not because of your results. They just want it different. But we all know who really understood risk here." I smiled, warmly but with distance. "You know, Allison, I don't hold it against you. I just want you to remember, when the system changes, don't forget who held it together." I passed Mark, the accountant, who silently stood up and shook my hand. The cafeteria, the same one where I used to read reports with printouts in the evenings, seemed a little colder now. Even the coffee vending machine didn't seem to be humming as it used to. And then, the unexpected happened. As I was about to leave the building, Tyler from the law school approached me. We barely spoke. He was technical, dry. But now he looked me in the eye. "I read your analysis of MDM 207, he said quietly. "I know it was taken off the system after you left." "That's nothing new," I replied. "I took a screenshot. I don't know why, it seems like they won't let you just walk away. Not everyone is going to keep quiet." "Thank you, Tyler, but I'm not coming back. I'm just watching." When I walked outside, the air smelled like leaves and a little bit like a burning brake. Maybe it was a truck in the back driveway, or maybe it was a sign. I put the box in the car, got behind the wheel, and pressed my forehead against the steering wheel for a moment. Not from fatigue, but from the silence. And you know what? At that moment, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a person who left the room before the fire started. They thought I would leave in silence. They didn't know me. I thought it would be harder to get used to it. But it was like taking an old ring off your finger. At first, it was strange, and then it was even easier. For the first week, I didn't touch anything related to Northstem logistics. I walked around Boise without a watch. I drank my coffee more slowly. I even cleaned out my mailbox for the first time in a year. But my hands still reached for the news, somehow subconsciously. And the second week, I saw an article in a local newspaper. A small message, almost on the margins. A batch of medical equipment was recalled in Texas due to errors in the accompanying documentation. I put the phone down, then picked it up again. I read it slowly. Equipment, medical, errors, MDM 207. Of course, there were no names in the story. There was no mention of Northstem, but I knew for sure that the supply to this clinic began under the very scheme I refused to sign. I found the sender's address. I checked it against the old certification registry I had saved on Dropbox. The contractor matched, and I smiled. Not gloatingly, just quietly, like after solving a difficult problem correctly. They really went ahead, without my signature. And now there are cracks. That same day, in the late afternoon, I received a letter to my personal email from Allison. "Cora, I'm sorry to bother you, but did you see the news from Texas? We had an emergency meeting today. Troy seemed tense. Jillian hasn't said anything. Maybe you were right. It's scary. We don't know what to do." I read the message several times. She didn't answer right away. And really, what did she expect to hear? "I told you so?" That's not my style. It's not about winning. This is about the fact that no one should lose. The next day, I received another message, this time from Tyler. The subject, confidential is important. Do you have a minute to talk? I think we're heading towards a case. I said yes. We met in a cafe on the outskirts of town. He came in wearing a cap, which looked funny given his always perfectly coiffed hair. He looked as if he didn't want to be seen, and at the same time wanted to say everything. They've taken everything, he said instead of greeting me. Completely. Even my backups from the shared disk. But I managed to save one thing, your analysis, and 2 other emails between Troy and an outside broker that show they knew about the risks. They just decided to ignore it. I listened in silence. I just nodded. I'm not asking you to come back, he added, but if it comes to the regulators, your opinion might matter. When I got home, I sat for a long time over the same paper I had been saving. It was already a little crumpled at the folds, but the text was still accurate, and so was the date. I knew I had to take the next step. But what was it? Give it to the press? To lawyers? Come out of the shadows? This time, I didn't want to win. I wanted no one else to lose because of someone else's overconfidence. And then I pulled an old business card off the shelf. White and blue, a little worn. On it, Hazel Norton, investigative journalist, Denver Journal. We met 3 years ago when I gave her a private comment on another case. She's the kind of person who doesn't look for scandal, just the truth. I dialed her number, and when she picked up the phone, I said, "Hi, Hazel. I have a document that they may try to remove. The story is not about betrayal. It's about foresight. Do you want to hear it?" They started to launch the project without me, but now I'm launching something of my own. And not from the inside, but from the point where you can see the whole picture. Tyler called me on Wednesday at 8 in the morning, when I hadn't even had time to make coffee. He's never been a morning person, and the fact that he called unannounced was already a wake-up call. "Are you sitting?" he asked with little foreplay. "I'm standing by the kettle," I replied, trying to joke, although his tone was such that the laughter got stuck somewhere between my throat and stomach. MDM 207 didn't pass the field test. Something about the certificates. Everyone is nervous, and everyone is pretending that no one saw the warning. Cora, your files are gone. All of them, even from the backup system. That was the last straw. Not emotional, not dramatic. It was rational. Like when you see that the crack in the house hasn't disappeared, it's just painted over. I contacted Hazel the same day. We were sitting in a coffee shop in South Boise. It was a simple place near a car wash that smelled of caramel, syrup, and chewed secrets. Hazel listened in silence, nodding only. I brought her printouts, saved PDFs of reports, screenshots of chats, a timeline, even a photo of an old whiteboard with charts that I had taken just as a keepsake. If one of the new users dies because of the wrong dose, they won't be able to wash it off, I said in the end, and I won't be silent if it happens. She said, "That's enough to get you started." And I knew she was not the type to give up. A week later, her article was published. The headline was ruthless. The company knew about the risks. It ignored them. It lost. My name was not mentioned in the article, but every quote was mine. Every date is accurate. And there were also things that I did not give. It turned out that she had other sources, probably Tyler, perhaps even someone from the new generation, those who were afraid to speak out loud but could no longer remain silent. After the publication, people started writing to me, old colleagues, even those we hadn't spoken to in years. Jillian is on sick leave. They say she had a panic attack. Troy was on his way to New York, but suddenly changed his mind. 3 more documents are missing from the system, the ones you used to create. They now say that no one knew you were writing anything. It was an email from Allison. I was sitting at the kitchen table. I had an article open on my laptop screen. Next to it was a cup with the words, "Measured, not mute." A gift from a colleague back in 2014. I didn't feel angry. No, I felt balance. Like after a long equation that finally came together. That evening, I opened a blank document. RiskFrame, a consulting platform for analysts who would never let their voices be silenced again. I wasn't going back. I didn't want to punish them. I just wanted to make sure that no one else had to go through what I had to go through. Without a name, no protection, no voice. I didn't exist. But now I was everywhere. In the headlines, in quotes, in meetings where they were silent, and in the looks that frightenedly searched for someone else who knew something. And it was even louder than if I had shouted from the roof. They changed the coffee in their office. It was a small thing. But do you know what it means? Someone made a comment. Someone no longer wanted the smell that reminded them of someone. Me. Because no matter how you slice it, they associated the smell of cinnamon with me, with my morning meetings, with the way I set the filter while Jillian said, "This is too complicated, let's simplify it." They also removed the white markers. Purely symbolically, no one wanted to write risk on the board anymore. Tyler wrote to me from his new email. "Don't look for me, but I'm ready to help. If you're serious about creating a risk frame, I'm with you. We've had too many solutions without thought. Maybe it's time to make a thoughted decision." I read this 3 times, and I answered with just one word. Yes. The next week, the news was posted on the internal channel. Management had created a temporary commission to assess responsibility for the implementation of MDM 207. The wording was so vague that even the lawyers probably laughed when they approved it. But not the employees. No one spoke out loud, but everyone was afraid to say something unnecessary. Jillian didn't give any more presentations. Her cameras were off, and her microphone often didn't work. Troy stopped writing wordy summaries. His updates were limited to the sentence, "according to plan." It wasn't a team anymore. It was a maze of fear, where everyone was afraid to take a step in the dark and stumble upon someone else's recording. I was sitting at home on a video call with Tyler. He was wearing a gray t-shirt, unshaven, but with the same eyes, alert and too smart to remain silent for long. "You know," he began, "they'll be looking for you, not because they want to punish you, but because if you're not there, their whole system looks ridiculous. They kept it on you, and now there is neither you nor the system. So let them look for you," I replied. RiskFrame didn't have a logo yet, but it had a form. Tyler agreed to run the technical part. I wrote the first analytical modules adapted for small and medium-sized businesses. The main idea was to make risk management not something that was implemented from above, but something that was understood from within. It was a crazy amount of work, but I was no longer working for someone else, and that changed everything. One morning, I woke up to a call. It was Hazel. "Have you seen the news yet?" "No, I haven't. Why not?" The company gave an official response. They said that all the analytical documents before the launch were properly reviewed, but some of them lost their relevance at the final stage. "Do you understand what this means?" I laughed. "Yes, they admitted that there were documents, but they blamed time itself. After that, no one touched me anymore. They were afraid, not of me, but of the silence in which I acted. They changed the coffee in their office. It seems like a small thing, but in a world where every gesture is a message, it mattered. The new blend was bitter, with notes of bergamot, and, as Allison once said, it drives away emotions. They wanted to erase even the smell left by my chair. But I was not a smell. I wasn't a smell. I was a sound in the room when everyone was silent. Tyler wrote from an email address I didn't recognize. "Don't look for me, but I'm with you. If you're serious about launching RiskFrame, I want to join you. We need to create a space where the analyst is not the last word. It's the first." His words sounded like confirmation that I wasn't just dreaming. I had moved something, and someone wants to go this way together. All I could say was, I don't need a system, I need people. The company started having operational meetings. Jillian's favorite format is a session without an agenda, but with a lot of discussion. One of her former colleagues wrote to me. We were sitting in a Zoom, and Jillian repeated everything is under control so often that it sounded like a spell. But everyone was afraid to ask, what exactly is under control? They didn't know who to look for, but they were looking for the culprit, someone who leaked the information. Everyone realized that it was me, but no one dared to say my name. A new reaction appeared on Slack. It was first used under a risk graph that someone accidentally uploaded. Then it started appearing under every post that alluded to previous documents. People did not like it. They were silently signaling, "We see. We won't say anything, but we did not forget." Meanwhile, I worked nights. The RiskFrame design was still raw, but the architecture was clear. The first module, Risks in the Procurement Process, adapted for private hospitals. Tyler found a beta user for us, a small clinic in Utah. They had already had to deal with a supply that failed once. They agreed to test it. No paperwork, no obligations, but with trust. I remember holding the phone with the first positive feedback. The clinic informed me that our algorithm had detected the incompatibility of the supplier even before placing the order. It was just a few lines of text, but I burst into tears, for the first time in a long time, with relief. Hazel called. Her voice was fast, energetic. The company had just issued an official statement. They admitted that some internal documents were not included in the final analysis. No names were mentioned, but everyone will understand. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. They admitted that they knew, and they still decided to keep quiet. Now let them continue to be silent, but without us. I was no longer in the shadows. I was in silence, but with my own voice. And RiskFrame was not a project. It was a platform for everyone who had not yet been heard. I haven't entered the building in a month, neither the guest office nor even the parking lot. My badge was still active, but it was more inertia than an invitation. I did not return. I had no intention of returning, but people talked. At first, it was private messages. Then there were chains of emails in which I was accidentally included. One of these topics had the headline, FWD, Incident with Risk Table _Legacy version. The sender was an old friend, Lana, an analyst in my department. She always spoke few words, but very precisely. She didn't write anything in the body of the email. She just sent a technical log, an error in a module that I had once rewritten from scratch. And she attached the old version, mine. No words, just the code. Of course, she violated the protocol, but at the same time, she restored history. Phrases like, "We should have listened to her. She said so. Do you think she reads our letters?" I even received letters from other departments. "I worked with your risk matrices in 2019. They were the cleanest. I still use them now, unofficially. I just wanted to say thank you." These messages were not large scale. They didn't have an explosive effect, but they were heard, and they grew. Meanwhile, we were preparing the second module in RiskFrame. This time, it was Prevention of Management Bias, a warning system for companies where decisions are made without assessing the impact. We created a conditional scale that took into account the amount of losses, the number of canceled internal projects, and, most interestingly, the level of staff turnover in key departments. I was joking. If they optimize processes anymore, the system will raise an alarm before they even have time to convene the board of directors. Tyler laughed, but through his teeth. They're probably up at night now counting how many more people might leave, voluntarily. One morning, I received a message from an HR specialist whom I had once consulted on a parent project. She had never been involved in internal politics. Her area of expertise is supporting people. She wrote, "Jillian left the office early yesterday. Then there was a rumor that she asked me to check who has access to the archived version of your documents. They are afraid, but the main thing is that they finally started to see how much you did when they lost it." And then I realized that their silence was not anger. It was confusion. They had never seen what real analytics looks like without blinders on. I was sitting on the terrace, drinking coffee and editing a RiskFrame presentation for a potential second client. And at some point, I caught myself thinking, I'm not sad. I'm not waiting for someone to admit their guilt, because I no longer need permission to be myself. My ideas, my schemes, my warnings, they no longer belong to them. They were my capital, my language, my memory. And if they spoke of me now, it was no longer as the silent one, but as someone who spoke out loud and left on her own. No letters, no system updates, no presentations. Just me, an old cup with a crack in it, and slow music from a list my sister had once sent me. There was Bill Evans, a little Nina Simone, and that Blackbird cover that for some reason always makes me think of the school library. For the first time since my release, I didn't feel like I had to prove anything. Not to anyone, not even to myself. Tyler wrote a short message that day. They tried to make changes to Risk Table again. The old version crashed again. but there are already 2 clinics in line for the test. Just hang in there. It works." I didn't answer, and he was not offended, because sometimes the best answer is silence, which does not require an apology. In the evening, I went to the company's website. I don't know why. Maybe it was a reflex, like those who sometimes search for an ex's name on Google, not even hoping to find something new. But there was something new there. The updated section, Company Values. And a new mission? Conscious risk is the basis of our trust. I laughed out loud, because this phrase is mine. I wrote it in the project documentation of 2020. It was in the 3rd paragraph, before the example of a medical mask supplier. And here it is, without quotes, without a footnote, without a name. It was just bolded on the first page. Really? I wasn't angry. I was shocked, not by what they took, but by the fact that they did not understand the main thing. The value is not in the wording. It is in the person who is ready to live by this principle. That evening, I sat down and wrote a list. Not to-dos, not tasks, not KPIs. It was a list of things I wanted to leave behind, and things that should go with me. I left the fear of being interrupted, the need to be the perfect employee, the syndrome that says, "You didn't do it, you were lucky," and I took with me the ability to see ahead, the ability to speak the language of numbers and feelings at the same time, and most importantly, the right to leave when it is no longer fair to stay. The next morning, I sent Tyler 3 words. I'm ready to move. Not to them, not against them, but past them. Because, as Nina Simone would say, freedom is no fear. I thought that my last day in that system would be loud. You know, like in the movies, slamming doors, screams that break through the walls, and a monologue of a few paragraphs in the style of, "You will remember my name." And it turned out to be quiet. I was not seen off. I didn't go back to get my things. My badge just stopped working on Monday. Tyler said he saw Jillian sign an order to permanently terminate Miss Grayson's employment in accordance with the changes in the structure of the engagement. No one even tried to call, and I wasn't expecting them to. But at RiskFrame, everything began to level out. After the second clinic, 2 more were lined up. Tyler suggested dividing the system into modules and making some of the code open source. We knew that if we wanted to change the rules, we had to give others the tools, not just an example. I created a new reporting structure, one that I had spent so long trying to push through the corporation. And this time, I didn't have to prove anything. I just had to build it. Because I was no longer playing in the hierarchy. I was creating my own language of action. One day, an old friend from the regional office wrote to me, "We see that you didn't just leave. You have built an alternative. This is rare." My only reply was, "I didn't leave. I stopped being silent." I bought a new laptop, without any software associated with my previous job. And do you know what the first folder was? The title, Silence is not neutral. Silence is not neutral. Because sometimes, for something real to be born, you need everything old to die without noise. I left no smoke behind, but some people are still coughing. Goals closed. Cora left her job on purpose, without waiting for an official gesture. She built RiskFrame as an alternative to corporate ignorance of reality. Her work was recognized, not by her boss, but by the system she was transforming. Cora did not become a symbol of revenge. She became an example. The story ended not with the sound of a blow, but with a choice to live differently.